What's going on? Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to another tutorial video. So in this video I'm going to be showing you guys how to use Splash Paint's brand new lineup in his store is military colors. So Splash Paints has recently just added a whole new lineup for military, which is a huge deal for those military lovers, for tanks or any type of military vehicle you desire. So you all, if you dealt with Splash Paints, you know his paints are amazing on automotive vehicles. I use his paints all the time for my model cars. So he asked me, so Dylan, are you considering trying out my new military colors for your next build? And I told him, I said, yeah, absolutely. I do have a few tanks in my stash. I do want to build one day. So I figured let's do a tutorial video on how to use them. So just like any other Splash Paints, they're just exactly the same as the automotive as these military ones. So there's no difference. Only difference is because, well, they're military colors. So which is a huge deal and super cool. So first off, what I'm doing is I'm using Splash Paint's dark gray primer, or dark silver sort is called. It's basically just like a darker primer, like a dark gray primer you want to call it. So I'm going over the whole tank with this color. I'll just give it a nice primer coat, and then we're going to go ahead and hit it with some black later on in the video. Alright, so now we're going to put on some black. So I'm using Splash Paint's Jet Black for the color. And you might be wondering, why am I using black? I thought the primer was good enough. You can just move on to your color coat. Well, the reason why I'm doing black is this is the shadow coat, I like to call it. So most of those military guys and all this fun stuff, they call it a shadow coat because these tanks, they have a lot of dark shadows on them, such as the wheels and certain parts of the body. So the shadow coat, it helps you to do less, the less of the Tamaya panel, however you want to call it. This just helps you you spray. So basically, the whole wheel assembly and certain parts of the body is going to leave the black. It basically makes it the green, which this tank's going to be, like a darker green than it actually is. And then certain spots I'm not going to spray too heavy because I do want the shadow to show through in some areas. So that's why we're doing the shadow coats. Alrighty, so next up is the shadow coat. So this is where we're going to be using some white. So now the whole tank is black. That's basically the whole shadow coat. So basically the part that I want to highlight to make the green not as dark, make it more, brighter from the actual bottle is, this is where the highlight coat comes from. So this is Splash Paint's Frozen White. This is the Frozen White Splash Paints I had for a while. I had just laying around, so I figured I'll use that. You can use any kind of white you desire, but basically I want to highlight the parts that I want to have the lighter green. So basically part of the body, part of the turret, some spots here. I did the whole front end in white because this tank actually has a red front end that I want to do that has the monster face. So that's why I did the whole front end in red. So basically just go slow. When I did the primer and the black, I had a pretty wide spray. My airbrush has two different tips on it to have a wide spray. That's what I use for the primer and the black because I covered the whole tank at that point. Right now, I'm only covering certain spots, so I put on a different tip that sprays much finer paint that, you know, I can control how much or where I want to spray it, so I'm not spraying the whole tank by accident. So just go over the parts you think you want to have highlighted, basically the parts that is mainly like visible, you know, that is usually highlighted. The parts that I'm keeping black is obviously going to be the shadow coat, and the green in this case is going to be a bit darker in those areas instead of the white. Alrighty, so next up is the Olive Giraffe. So this is the whole color for this tank. So originally some tanks are camouflage, and you know, some have this, some have that, but this one is particularly all green. So we're not going to be doing any camouflage, so this is the whole main color, Olive Giraffe. So like I said, this is all new color from Splash Paints, which is awesome. So everything is done. We got it primered, we got the shadow coat, and we also got the highlight coat. So now it's time to do the color. So like I said, the black is the shadow coat. It's just gonna keep the green kind of toned down a bit. The white is gonna bring up the tone a bit more to highlight that certain parts that I want to highlight. So the paint I'm using, or you know, not the paint, but the spraying, I'm spraying the paint not too heavy. This paint, Splash Paints has designed this paint where it covers super well. I mean, this covers very well. As you can tell, the way it's spraying super nice, just like all this paint is. But this color, it just covers super well. I mean, most of us, before Splash Paints came out, most of us used the Tamaya paints. Tamaya paints were amazing. They're amazing paints, and you all know how amazing those colors covered. And I'm super glad Splash Paints made these paints cover in one coat, basically, because most of these tank builders, such as myself, I only like to do one or maybe 1.5 coats, because you don't want to do a full coverage, because you want your shadow coat to still show through. If you put on basically 2-3 coats, you're gonna delete your whole shadow coat, and you're gonna look like you did nothing. All that hard work you put on the black and white is going to be completely nothing. So most of us only put on one coat because we still want to see the shadow and highlight coat under this paint. So that's super helpful, and I think that's a huge plus and benefit on Splash Paint's side by doing that. That is super awesome. So I'm still using the fine tip airbrush tip, because I don't really want there's some spots I don't want to hardly put any paint on, such as where the wheels are, the road wheels. I don't really want to highlight those as much, especially the black rubber. I want to keep those as cleanly as possible. I paint in black anyway, but certain spots you don't want the green. You kind of want it to be the completely shadow part. So that's why we're using the fine tip. So just go slow, go easy. Don't go heavy, of course, because these paints, I mean, they cover very well. You're gonna have no issues with these. Then after you do this, of course, put on your matte clear. Splash Paints, he does offer a matte clear finish, which, you know, for military tanks, you do want a matte clear, unless you want a shiny tank for some reason. So, but now these paints are amazing, and they cover, like I said, they cover super well. You can have no issues with them. I mean, these paints are just, they're incredible to work with. Like I said, they're pretty thin, so for those airbrush guys, which I'm sure most of us do, military tanks have an airbrush. But if you don't, I mean, you have Tamaya still, but this is a huge benefit for airbrush guys, because you all know Splash Paints is pretty thin and airbrush ready. This is just pour it in your airbrush and you're ready to spray. Unlike Tamaya, you do have to thin it down a little bit more and then spray it. Not a big deal from Tamaya. Tamaya paints are amazing, but it's pretty cool. Splash Paints has jumped into the military game and giving it a try. So Splash Paints, he does have a wide variety of colors for military colors right now. I'm sure he's gonna bring out a lot more in the future, but he does have about, I think I checked, about 100, if not almost 100 colors available for the military guys. So that's awesome. But I mean, guys, this is a huge benefit. Splash is trying to get into the military hobby as well, because you know, all those Splash paints, he does mostly automotive, but I think it's a super cool positive. He is getting into the military and giving the military folks a try on his paints, and I think that's super cool. So how the paint lays out, the paint actually dries flat, which is amazing. So if you don't want to dull coat it, you don't have to, but I kind of do recommend you do dull coat it, just give it the extra protection. But if for some reason you don't want to dull coat it, these paints dry flat no matter what, which is awesome. So, but other than that, guys, I mean, there's nothing else to say. I am going to be doing another tank here shortly, so I'll be back after this. But for now, enjoy the video of me painting this tank, and it was amazing to paint this thing. The paint covered super well, and I'm so happy how it turned out. As you can see, the color turned out amazing. This is just one coat. Maybe it's 1.5 you want to call it, but I mean, it just looks absolutely incredible. And then after that, we'll be doing some matte clear, which I didn't do on camera because you can't really tell what I did. It's just kind of me just spraying in mid-air, looks like. So now we're gonna be doing the Tamaya M1, the main battle tank by Tamaya. So now we're gonna be using Splash Paints Desert Tan. So I went ahead and did the black and the white base off camera because, you know, it's basically the same exact way I did on another tank, but the main color is a different color. This is a Desert Tan by, again, Splash Paints, and we'll be doing the same exact way. Not too thick because I don't want the shadow coat and the highlight coat to disappear. And again, like I said, this is one coat, maybe 1.5 you want to call it, but this color as well just covered super well from Splash Paints. And also another benefit on these paints, they dry super fast. I mean, it's about 75-80 degrees the day I was spraying. So basically, when the paint goes down, basically about like 2 minutes, not even, the paint is dry and I can touch it, which is good for military guys because you're constantly touching a tank. If you have your turret attached, you are going to have to move your turret, or in this case, like I'm using the turret right here, I do have to pick it up and paint the underside, get the different angles, because obviously you can't use the other Tamaya stand for, you know, model car bodies, so you do have to constantly pick up the body or the turret in this case, different angles. And it's a huge benefit because these paints dry super fast, and with that benefit you can pick up the painted part that you just painted and move the body around, which is a huge deal. I think if the paint covered and it takes 10 years to dry, that's a huge downfall because you have to constantly pick up this thing and paint it in different angles. So that's one big positive. Another positive about the Splash Paints, they dry super fast, which is awesome. Just like the Tamaya dried just as fast. Basically, when you put the paint down, within 1.5 minutes, maybe 2 minutes, it's touched to the dry. I mean, it's amazing. So that's another benefit the Splash Paints did to these paints. It dries super good, and not only that, they cover very well. So I think Splash did his homework, and these paints are just like Tamaya paints, but pre-thin and ready for airbrush. That's a huge benefit. So that's a huge deal, and these paints are amazing. So I'm going to invite you to watch the rest of this, and I'll be back by the end of the video. Alright, so in this video, it kind of looks like I'm covering the paint very thick, but I'm actually not. This is actually very light. That's what I'm saying, guys. This paint covers so well, it looks like you're literally just covering the whole thing, like with one coat, which is pretty cool. But I'm actually not. In person, I am leaving some black spots on the side skirt, you want to call it, on this part. There are some black spots still available. It's just my lighting. The lighting is super good and it's very glaring off the part. But trust me, guys, I am not pushing much paint out. I mean, look at my gun on my airbrush, the trigger throw. I'm not pulling the trigger back as far. I'm only pulling it just a tad bit, and I'll zoom in when I do it. I mean, I'm really just pulling the trigger back just a tad bit when I spray these paints, because, like I said, these paints they cover super well, but they can run on you very easily, especially if you have a big tip airbrush. I'm using a 5mm airbrush, or tip airbrush, or needle, I want to call it. And these paints, they're pretty thin and they can run on you pretty easily. So go easy, go slow, but trust me, guys, I am going pretty darn light on these parts. But I mean, it's just, these paints are really cool, and they are going to take a bit to get used to. It took me a bit to get used to it, but I mean, damn, these paints are just so cool, and I'm so glad Tamaya or Splash Paints is doing this, and it's just another benefit to for the military tank, or military community out there that do military tanks and stuff, and it's just another choice of color for them. So there we go, guys. That's my tutorial video, and it's pretty simplified. It's just like Tamaya paint. I gotta say it like that. It's just like Tamaya paint we all know and love, but just pretty thin and ready for airbrush, basically. I mean, Splash Paints, he's outdone himself. This is amazing. Like I said, he has about 50 to almost 100 colors on his website, and he is gonna progress that website even more in the future, so that's awesome. But what he has on his website is very good, and they're basically the well-named brand or colors, you want to call it, for military. So that's pretty cool. And like I said, it's a huge benefit. It's just another company out there for military, and I think that's a huge plus on his side, besides, Tamaya. But overall, I gotta say, these paints are amazing. Just like his automotive colors, they're just as good. I mean, they're the same, they're pretty thin, and they cover super well. And these pictures you see, these pictures are only, or these, I only sprayed these 2 tanks with 1.5 coats, and it's just incredible. And you can tell in these pictures, you can see the black still showing, which is awesome. That's the way I want to look. And Splash Paints, he did send me a few other colors for the yellow, but I didn't really do that because I'm so happy how this turned out, and it just looks amazing. But there you go, guys. That's my tutorial video. I hope you enjoyed. But until my next video, I hope you guys will give these paints a try, and I highly recommend them. But alright, guys, until my next video, and I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll catch you guys next time. Take it easy.